Humans can be so foolish sometimes, don't you think? My name is Erica, and I've been married to my husband for 3 years. We live together with our adorable kitten, Bella. My mother-in-law places immense value on academic achievements and takes great pride in the fact that her son, Kevin, graduated from a prestigious university. In our small town, where there's only one convenience store, she's quite a well-known figure and has a strong connection with the neighbors. At neighborhood gatherings, she mostly boasts about her son's accomplishments. She believes that a woman who marries such a man should also have an impressive educational background. When we first met, during the announcement of our engagement, she immediately asked, "Which university did you graduate from?" "I'm a Harvard alumna, you know." When I told her the name of my university, she made a noticeably disapproving face. It seemed she hadn't heard of it. To her, an unfamiliar university meant it was a lower-tier school, and she assumed I was poorly educated. Since then, she seemed to have a problem with my educational background. While she allowed the marriage, she began to treat me poorly afterward. She would wait until my husband and father-in-law weren't around and then say things like, "Why did Kevin have to marry someone with such a low level of education?" She'd imply, "Someone like you isn't a good match for him." She even suggested, "You must have forced him into this marriage or manipulated him somehow." And the worst was, "It's a shame for any child to have a mother like you. It's better not to have children at all." These were the kinds of things she would say every time we met. Fortunately, we weren't living together at the time, but she would still come over whenever she had free time just to criticize my education and then leave. My mother-in-law seemed pleased with herself, but it stressed me out so much that I started getting gray hairs. She even gossiped about me to the neighbors, saying things like, "Erica can't even do basic math," or "She can only recite the alphabet up to H." As a result, I often found myself being laughed at by the locals. I considered talking back many times, but I knew she would likely fabricate a story about me getting violent and spread it around the neighborhood. So, I endured it all without telling anyone. One day, my in-laws decided to rebuild their house. My father-in-law had hurt his back, and they wanted to make the house more accessible. We were grateful for everything my father-in-law had done for us, so we offered to help pay for the renovations. My mother-in-law planned a big celebration with the neighbors for the housewarming, and of course, I ended up being the one to prepare everything. "I'll help you," my husband offered, but my mother-in-law quickly intervened, saying, "Come here, Kevin. I want to show off my highly educated son," and dragged him away. As she left, she remarked, "Someone with your low education should at least be good at cooking, so get on with the preparations." During the party, my mother-in-law was in high spirits. As expected, she began her usual bragging to everyone, saying, "My son built this house. What a wonderful and beautiful son he is. I wonder who raised such a child." "Oh, that's me." The older ladies in the neighborhood sounded envious, which only encouraged her. She continued, "And then there's his wife. She didn't contribute a penny but acts like she owns the place. She doesn't even want to give me grandchildren. The wicked woman." She then turned her usual disdainful gaze toward me and continued to insult me. Annoyed, I replied bluntly, "What's up?" "There she goes. That's the problem with uneducated wives," she shot back. "She hasn't had any kids yet, she's greedy for money, and she's probably eyeing our inheritance." She even accused me. "I bet she put something in today's meal. None of you should eat it," belittling the food I had prepared. Ironically, she was eating my cooking herself. Not that it mattered. Even if there were something in it, she probably survived just fine. She's resilient, to say the least. She whispered with a sneer, "Well, can't expect much from Erica's kids. They'll have those low education genes mixed in," making sure my husband and father-in-law couldn't hear her. She always harassed me without letting others catch on, which infuriated me. The ladies around us chimed in with laughter, agreeing with her. That's right. When I glared at them, they awkwardly looked away. I couldn't understand why they agreed with her if they felt bad about it. She wasn't some powerful figure, or maybe she had some hold over them. Even as these thoughts crossed my mind, the stream of insults from my mother-in-law continued unabated. I wondered how long this life would go on. Did I have to endure her bullying forever? For what purpose? Lost in these thoughts, I soon made a decision. "I can't stand it anymore," I suddenly shouted, startling both my mother-in-law and the kitten Bella. "Sorry for scaring you, Bella. I'll give you some treats later," I said to the kitten. Then I turned to my mother-in-law and said, "You hate me, right? You don't want a child born from someone with low education like me, do you?" And who knows what would happen to them after they're born? Maybe they'd be abandoned in the mountains. Oh, scary, scary. What? I would never do such a thing, she exclaimed. And by the way, I expect you to repay every penny I contributed to building this house, I stated calmly. My mother-in-law was visibly shaken by my unexpected words. What nonsense are you talking about all of a sudden? She retorted, her voice echoing through the house. This commotion caught the attention of my husband and father-in-law, who quickly came over to see what was happening. The surrounding guests also looked on curiously, so I decided to seize the opportunity to fully confront my mother-in-law and expose her wrongdoings. What's all the yelling about? My husband asked, clearly alarmed. Listen to this. Erica, who claims she didn't contribute any money, is now demanding I pay her back for the house. My mother-in-law exclaimed, attempting to paint me as unreasonable. All eyes suddenly turned to me. But you said you didn't want a child from me, right? Mother-in-law, isn't that what you've been saying, ladies? I asked the nearby women. Yes, that's true. She always says that, they admitted reluctantly. She said she doesn't want those low education genes, they added. My mother-in-law stood there, stunned by their betrayal, her mouth agape. She probably never imagined they would turn on her. Serves her right. Why should I silently endure bullying from you? I'm not your punching bag for stress relief. I turned back to my mother-in-law, my voice seething with anger. My husband and father-in-law gasped in shock at the revelation. Have you been bullying Erica? Don't mess with me, my father-in-law demanded, his face flushing red with rage as he confronted her. Despite being unnerved by his rare outburst, my mother-in-law attempted to defend herself. But it's true, the child from low-educated Erica won't turn out well. Besides, she's just a housewife living off my son. I haven't said anything wrong, she shouted defiantly. However, as she noticed the cold, disapproving stares from both my husband and father-in-law, her face went pale. In front of them, she always portrayed herself as the perfect mother-in-law. Now, her thick-skinned demeanor, which was more resilient than her makeup, had been thoroughly stripped away. My husband sighed and turned to my mother-in-law with a cold expression. Mom, what are you talking about? Erica graduated from Harvard. She's far more educated than I am. The room fell into stunned silence. What do you mean? The university Erica mentioned before we got married was some obscure third-rate place, my mother-in-law exclaimed in panic. But the truth was, I did graduate from Harvard. The university she mistook for a third-rate institution was actually Cambridge University, an esteemed name recognized worldwide. After earning my degree, I continued my studies in the UK and completed my master's degree there, which is my highest qualification. When my mother-in-law inquired about my alma mater, I simply mentioned Cambridge without thinking much of it. I never anticipated that this misunderstanding would lead to such mistreatment. Given her Harvard background and high regard for education, she should have known that Cambridge is among the top 5 universities globally. Although the misunderstanding had escalated things, I had no intention of correcting it. I had lost any desire for a long-term relationship with such a mother-in-law. After all, a person's worth isn't defined by their educational background. My parents didn't attend college, but I hold them in the highest regard. I hadn't intended to discuss my education, but this was a perfect opportunity to address it. My actions had clearly upset my husband on my behalf. He said, "Listen, this house was funded in part by $100,000 from Erica's savings. Savings you, Mom, looked down upon. How could you insult her like that? And by the way, your college isn't Harvard. It's just a school near Harvard. That doesn't make you a Harvard graduate, Mother. Now's not the time for that discussion. We're talking about the money. There's no way a housewife like Erica could have accumulated that kind of money. Erica isn't just a housewife. In fact, she earns several times more than I do." "What did you say?" My mother-in-law's surprise was evident. "Yes, I make my living through stock trading, earning over $10,000 a month. I never mentioned this to my mother-in-law, so it's understandable that she might have assumed otherwise. Given her love for money almost as much as her reverence for education, if she knew, she'd likely demand luxury cars and the latest gadgets. That's why I asked my husband to keep it a secret. Since I'm usually at home when she calls or visits unexpectedly, she assumed I was just a housewife." My mother-in-law stood there, speechless and stunned by this revelation. To answer a question some of you might have, why did I contribute to the house's funds for someone I didn't like? Normally, one wouldn't want to give a single cent. The reason is straightforward. It was to avoid any arguments about living arrangements. By funding a comfortable and accessible home for her, I hoped she would be content and not bother us, especially after her minor injury. If she was comfortable in her own house, she'd likely visit ours less often. It was an expense I justified for my own peace of mind. Doesn't that make sense? Now, having fully recognized my mother-in-law as an adversary, I said firmly, I want the full $100,000 back. If you can't repay it, sell the land and house. If that's not feasible, borrow the money from a financial institution. That's outrageous. This house is ours now, and I have no intention of giving you a penny, my mother-in-law declared defiantly. Breaking his silence, my father-in-law shouted, How much longer do you plan to upset everyone around you? Look at the room. Nobody is on your side. My mother-in-law began to cry as my father-in-law berated her, but despite his pleas for her to apologize, she refused to humble herself, her pride too great. In the end, she left without offering an apology or even glancing my way. I'm so sorry, Erica. If I had been more attentive, this wouldn't have happened, my father-in-law said, deeply apologetic. There was no need for him to apologize. My mother-in-law only bullied me when he was unaware. Please lift your head. You've done nothing wrong. Please continue to treat me as your real daughter, I said, placing my hand on his shoulder. My father-in-law responded, Thank you, Erica. Leave her to me. I'll ensure she never bothers you again. And he went after my mother-in-law. The mood around us seemed to lighten as the situation settled. The neighborhood ladies, visibly relieved, apologized to me and promised to sever ties with my mother-in-law, which greatly lifted my spirits. A month later, my father-in-law announced that he was divorcing my mother-in-law. It turned out the issues went beyond that day's confrontation. My mother-in-law had been involved in an affair with a highly educated, middle-aged man. My father-in-law, suspecting something was wrong, had hired a private investigator to gather evidence discreetly. The divorce was swiftly finalized, and my mother-in-law was ordered to repay the $100,000 I had contributed for the house renovations as part of the alimony. Apparently, her lover financed this amount, and in return she was now working as a maid, my father-in-law reported with a look of disbelief. Now, both my father-in-law and I can live free from the troubles caused by my mother-in-law. I'm now 5 months pregnant, and my husband, father-in-law, and the neighborhood ladies are all deeply concerned about my health and have been incredibly supportive. In a way, I have to thank my mother-in-law for helping me gain such a supportive circle. Looking ahead, I'm excited about the future and look forward to a happy life with my soon-to-be-born child, my husband, father-in-law, and